students should stop worrying about like high level trends going on in terms of, job market is bad, there's a recession happening, and so on. We're also bringing actual like immigration lawyers who've spent decades of their life helping thousands of immigrants to these events so students can get to talk to them and ask questions like legal questions.
So hello everyone. Today we have Soundarya here. She quit her 200K job at Salesforce to become a solo founder for her company and to finally achieve her dream of writing two books and to pursue her passion. So hi Soundarya, can you please introduce yourself? And by the way, she got O1 visa as well as a founder.
Thank you so much. I guess I'm coming back on your channel after almost a year, I think, since the last time I was here. Thanks so much for having me. Introduce myself. Well, I'm currently a founder and author. I got the O1 visa, as you'd mentioned, a few months ago only, like 4 months ago at this time. And this is after getting an O1 visa denied in 2022, which we'll probably talk about. I used to work at Salesforce as a product manager. And then before that, I was a graduate from Columbia University for a master's in management science and engineering. And I'm originally from Chennai, India.
Oh, wow. So, can you share the roller coaster journey of getting it denied and finally getting accepted? So, what did you learn from that process?
I got it denied. I still remember May 23rd, 2022 is when I got the denial notice in the mail. Um, I didn't get out of bed for the next 2 days. Like that entire day, I was in bed watching Big Bang Theory and eating food and just crying a lot because really what the O1 meant for me was freedom to do what I wanted, which I desperately craved for back then. And I also spent like 10,000 plus dollars into the whole process and 1 year of my life. So eventually on the third day, I got up and, moved on from it. Um, and decided to write a book called Unshackled on because I wanted to not just for, capture the experience of the Owen process, but rather the experience of what it means to be an immigrant, of moving to a new country, not knowing anything about this new place, and figuring out how to survive there and thrive there as well. And so, long story short, the reason I got the O1 a year later, I would say in big part is because of Unshackled, of like taking all this frustration with the system and channeling it into a productive way by publishing this book, which I wrote with a lawyer, building a community for other O1, EB1 talent visa aspirants out there. And a bunch of other things happened in that year, like getting some press on my work, getting a grant from Emergent Ventures, and so all of this added up to my profile, O1 profile. So when I refiled next year, they approved within 3 days this time. So it was just great experience. Getting that approval notice, I still remember, was such a beautiful moment for me.
Because the amount of value you've added is magical. Because before talking to you, I always used to think like, oh, it's only for, superheroes, medalists, or PhD holders, or someone who has written 30 plus papers. And like a software engineer or a normal employees like who are just contributors, we are called like contributors because we're not even managers, is unimaginable. And you made that happen and made us aware about it. And like hearing from you on that day that you got it rejected was deeply saddening for me as well. Like, and I hope that you get it next time, but I'm so happy to know that you finally got it. So
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to mention there that, I remember we had the last time we had a podcast together was end of, I want to say end of 2022. This was a few months after the rejection. And we made a podcast where we talked about the O1 visa. And back then I was like, I haven't gotten it yet, but I've done a lot of research. So here's what I can tell you. And now I feel much more confident because I feel like now that I actually got it, I can really talk about the nuances of the process, like what it really takes to get to the finish line. So I'm glad to be back.
And by the way, before talking about your O1 visa journey, can you please share what O1 visa is again?
Absolutely. And for me, it's like I say O1 so much that it's very easy for me to know what it means, but I'm assuming some people don't know. Um, O1 is an extraordinary ability visa. It was introduced by the US in 1990 along with the H1B, but unlike the H1B, it doesn't have a lottery or a cap. So you don't have to go through like a lottery system to get picked in some random selection. Rather, it's entirely based on your talent and merit. And the US introduced this because they wanted talented people across the world to come to the US. And so they never put a cap on this visa. And of course, the next question is who is talented and who's not? Like, how do they even measure that? And for that, the USCIS introduced something called like the 8 criteria for the O1 visa. And these, include things like getting press on your work, winning an award, distinguished award in your field, judging the work of others in your field, um, getting paid a high salary, and so on. So there's 8 such criteria, which I call the 8 pillars, and you have to meet 3 out of the 8 criteria to qualify for the O1 visa. And so when I filed my O1 the second time around, I actually submitted evidence for all 8 criteria. Not because I had strong evidence in all of them, but rather I would say I had strong evidence in maybe 3 or 4 of them, and kind of medium evidence in two and weak evidence in two. And yeah, I feel like you so beautifully said, like, people think it's only meant for Nobel laureates or PhD holders or Olympic athletes, but it's just not true. Like, I am a case study of that. And I know hundreds of other people who got the O1, who are just really great contributors to their community, like software engineers who done a lot of open source work within their field, maybe published 1 or 2 papers on that, or product managers who had worked on impactful projects at a big corporation. So, I mean, this isn't to deny that the O1 is hard to get. I know that. I went through a denial. It's not meant for everyone. But I do think people overestimate the bar that they have to meet. And they don't even like it's like you give up before you start the process. So I'm hoping that more people at least start the process. And if they feel like at some point, hey, it's not for me, then that's okay. But don't discount the option, because the O1 is an excellent alternative to the H1B for the like very talented immigrants, because no lottery, it doesn't require a minimum salary, unlike the H1B, which is great for founders, and you can renew it forever. So the H1B has a cap of 6 years, but the O1, you can just keep renewing it technically forever.
Amazing. Now, when you mention these categories, let's say 8 categories, high salary, or even in fact, you have to get your work published, it's really hard to measure what to what extent you should do this work, right?
Hmm.
Because from your rejection, maybe you can share like what was the difference between first time and second time? Maybe like your publications reached to an extraordinary level, like maybe Wall Street Journal, or maybe earlier it was published by like maybe smaller news media. So what is the extent you should actually aim for in those 8 categories?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's like, when do you stop? When do you stop and decide that, okay, I have enough, I'm gonna file? Um, the answer is it depends. There is no clear like answer for that. I think the best person to answer that would be your lawyer. Like, a lawyer would quickly spot and tell you, because they've filed hundreds of cases, so they know what works and what doesn't. They can tell you that I think you need more. But in my specific case, I actually filed an O1B the first time around, and I filed an O1A the second time. The difference is O1B is meant for artists. So I filed as a writer in the first time. And the second time I filed an O1A, which is meant for people in like business, education, technology, and so on. So I filed as a founder. So that was one key difference. Um, I think also I just obviously had more things to say. Like, I had more press articles. I had a grant, which is considered an award. I had published another book by then. Um, but I think more than that, what I had the second time around was a more compelling story to say. Because the first time I pitched myself as a writer in the field of education and technology, and it's too broad. Like, what does that even mean, right? What is education? What is technology? But the second time around, I pitched myself as a founder of an educational venture that specializes in promoting talent mobility. So, talent mobility essentially means like we help talented people cross borders and go where they need to be going, which is what, Unshackled is all about. It's about lowering the barrier for highly skilled people to cross borders. And so I think one advice I would have for anyone watching is, if you do want to get an O1 visa, first figure out your specialization. Like, what is one area where you can actually say that you're one of the top experts in this area? And in my case, I could say with a lot of certainty that I am an expert in helping people cross borders, especially and move to the US, because I'd, done a lot of work in this field before. So, and it cannot be as broad as I'm one of the top product managers in healthcare. That's just too broad. It has to be much more like specific, like I'm one of the top product managers in healthcare, specializing in like virtual, patient monitoring using this device. So something more specific is the point.
Wow. So overall, we can say showing expertise is very important in this, in the area of O1, or to be qualified as O1.
I mean, it's not even, I think, so O1 actually, if you read about it, O1 is an extraordinary ability visa, and it's entirely about showing extraordinary ability and skill and contribution in a specific field. So like that keyword is in a specific field. Those are the keywords in that sentence. So in your case, for example, like you could say that you're one of the top experts in um, I know that you do mobile and web app development, but if you were to go one level deeper in that, I'm curious actually, like what would you say that's something that you're actually an expert in right now?
I would say I am expert in maybe like Android app development. Like if I have to go deeper, and if I have to go even deeper into that, I would say like backend Android app development.
That's great. So now that you have that, if you were to say file an O1 at some point, you would have to make sure that everything in your application is around that one sentence, which is like getting press on your work around backend Android app development, judging other Android app developers. So I think that's the key is like figure out your specialization and then build an entire moat of evidence around it to put forth to the officers.
So that's very, very helpful. Now, talking about this year, I think this year is peak of recession, and it's very difficult for an average student to get a job. Like 50% of the students from even top schools might not be able to get a job after graduating in the US. So it becomes very important for them to secure better options, because I just read, you also posted about it, that USCIS is tracking the people who were trying to get into, some scam companies to get OPT,
Mm, mm,
CPT, day one CPT. Now USCIS is tracking, and some companies like, Facebook, Meta, Google, they say if you're coming to work here on day one CPT, no, we will not allow that. You want to come here with some scam consultancy, they will not allow that.
mm.
So it's becoming very, very difficult in this era. So what advice you would have for those students? And later we can talk about O1 in it.
Absolutely. Advice for students graduating this year. I mean, I can talk from an immigration standpoint, some ideas for these students on what they can do to not be kicked out of the country. Because the reality is, when you graduate on an F1 visa and enter your OPT, you get 90 days of unemployment once the OPT clock begins, right? And so you do have to find something in those 90 days. If not, you would have to leave the country. Um, I've written, posts about this on LinkedIn as well before as to a few options is that number one, you can volunteer. So one of the good things about the OPT is that it's very flexible in what you can like what it lets you do. So you could reach out to startups. Don't reach out to, scam consulting firms. Rather reach out to upcoming startups in your city, in your area, and tell them, hey, I'm on an OPT. I would love to volunteer part-time at your company because it matches my skill set. And it'll help me, like it'll keep me in the country so I can also figure out a full-time job eventually. And I'm sure, startups would love free help because they're always looking for talented people. That's one way in which you can stop the unemployment clock.
That's very well said, but I wanted to argue because many startups are not even allowed to hire free labor. Like it's
Hmm.
it from legal point of way, it's considered that, oh, you have to pay some sort of money.
That's actually a
So
good point. Yes. Great point, actually. You're right. There is a law in the US. Labor laws do say that you have to pay people for their work. In that case, I think the option is then going to a nonprofit that doesn't have those laws, maybe, and then reaching out to them with the same proposition. And here is where I'm just giving ideas right now. I highly recommend students to talk to their like university's designated school official. They'll have a list of these organizations where you could potentially reach out to for volunteering. That's
absolutely.
one, number one. And number two is self-employment OPT. I know this is not an option for a lot of students, but you can technically set up an LLC or a company and then kind of work for that company as a self-employed individual. It makes sense for students who may have some entrepreneurial ideas in the future to start that from now itself. And once again, it stops your unemployment clock, technically. Um, and then there is cap exempt H-1B, which once again is you could reach out to your university itself and tell them, hey, I'd love to like get hired by the university for a part-time position or volunteer for a part-time position. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of options, but I think the underlying thing is students should stop worrying about like high level trends going on in terms of, job market is bad, there's a recession happening, and so on. That is obviously happening, but it doesn't help your scenario in any way, right? Like thinking about that, worrying about that. Rather, I would think about this is the reality. Here are the rules of the game that I have to play. How can I play the game better? Like in terms of what can I do? Am I doing everything in my power to first of all get a job where I am? Or am I like wasting time scrolling through Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok trying to figure out what are other people doing? I think that's yeah, without sounding harsh, I just feel like we can only take help if we learn to help ourselves. And I would encourage students to think about what can you do right now in terms of like maybe signing up for an event in your area, networking, like reaching out to people in your city who you can talk to, um, first securing your unemployment, like getting some volunteer position somewhere so that your clock stops running, and then having that time to think through it. So yeah, I don't know what you feel about those, tips, but that's what comes to my mind.
I generally agree with all the points you shared because these are saving students from further deportation. Because if they get involved in any scam consultancy, it will not just like harm the consultancy, but more than that, it will harm the student because student will be deported and might not be able to come to the US for the next 3 to 5 years. That is more riskier than maybe like joining maybe a low paid job at the university or maybe trying
Absolutely.
the risk of starting a company. That is much better option.
Yeah, yeah, and it's temporary, right? Like you will eventually get something. And if nothing, you can go back to your home country and then re-enter another time after you get a job. Because I realize a lot of these students do have loans that they have to pay back, which is the main thing, right? Like I graduated with like a $80,000 loan from Colombia. So it was a thing hanging over my neck the entire time. I had to pay it back quickly. So I can only imagine the stress you must feel when you have that kind of like commitment that you have to fulfill.
Absolutely right. Now, Soundarya, can you imagine yourself as an 18-year-old or 22-year-old again coming to the US as a student? And now, how would you plan those 2 to 4 years for undergrad, masters, so that first of all, you can be an expert, master of at least one, plus to use that expertise later in your career for O1?
Oh, um, wow. Yeah. Great, great question again. I came to the US when I was 21, and I believe you came when you were 18 for your bachelor's. Um, I, I, I think it's such a, ripe age, and more than anything, universities are such great locations to like make use of resources because you're surrounded by people who are all talented, ambitious, they want to do something, they want to keep learning. Um, and I think a lot of the things that an O1 visa requires, you can do right from the beginning itself. So let's start with judging, for example. Um, a lot of people actually, like, especially in tech fields, they apply for judging when they file an O1 because it's one of the easier criteria, I would say, than anything else. Because it's like with high salary, there's not much you can do. Either you get a high salary or you're not getting it. But with judging, it's in your control. You can go out there and judge competitions and peer review papers. And these
Hackathons.
are right. And these are things you can easily do at a university to like as a stepping stone because there are competitions happening all the time within universities. There's like startup weekends and pitch competitions and hackathons. Um, and you're also, if you're, let's say, in a research track, you have people around you publishing papers. So you can try to get yourself on a peer reviewing committee to start reviewing these papers. And just to give an example, for my O1 last year, I'm not technical, so I cannot really judge hackathons and such, but I do have a lot of experience with writing. So I reached out to a lot of my PhD friends, and then I asked them, could you nominate me as a reviewer for any of the journals you're part of right now? And so one of them submitted a nomination to Springer, which is, a big journal. And Springer liked my profile and they invited me to come peer review a few papers for them. Um, and that's how I was able to show judging in my O1 application as well. I peer reviewed a few papers for Springer. But imagine if I could do this in a university setting, it would be a lot faster because I could literally walk up to, say, a researcher at a lab and be like, hey, could you help me, like, nominate me at some place? Or I could volunteer myself for a conference happening where people present papers, and I could ask the conference committee, could I volunteer in any capacity? I just want to help. So you like get your foot in the door first, and then you slowly go up because you may not be able to, for example, judge papers from the day one because you don't have the credentials for that, but you are surrounded by people who have that, so you can learn from them, you can slowly follow in their footsteps. I just feel like there is this like ripe environment for learning and collaboration in a university because everyone is there for the same purpose, that when you graduate you don't really have that anymore. You're living in like two-bedroom apartments in a city somewhere. Your roommates are not looking like they don't have the same goal as you. So it gets harder and harder. So, anyways, that's one criteria. And I can go into other criterias if you want, but I think that's how you start slowly preparing your case for an O1.
Yeah, and I think a further way could be to learn in public and to collaborate. And I think a wonderful opportunity for students to learn in public could be like to, whatever they're learning, to put it on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever they can. Plus, to actually collaborate it with as many people as possible with similar mindset. And one way could be, to join your meetup. So can you share more about your meetup and how can students with this mindset, collaborate with you?
Yes, great point again on collaboration, because once again, let's say you want to publish a paper when you're working at a company. That's harder because you're not around people who are looking to publish papers. They're there to work. But at a university, like you can easily find someone who's interested in the same topic and could potentially write an article with you or a case study or a white paper or something. So I think that ripe, very rich ground for collaboration is there in universities. And speaking of the meetup, so I launched something called the Unshackled Campus Store back in January of this year. This is a countrywide initiative that we're planning where we're going to be visiting 15 universities, including, Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, Boston University, and so on, across 4 states in the US, or 4 cities in the US. And we're going to be hopefully reaching out to 3,000 plus students in person at these events. And this is entirely meant it's a free event entirely meant for international graduate students in the US to come and understand their immigration options after graduation. So, yeah, that's the initiative. And like our purpose is, can we make students more proactive even before they graduate? So that they're not only relying on the H1B, because the H1B is like a lottery ticket, right? Like there's no way to know if you're going to get it. The chance of getting picked last year was 1 in 5. So it's probably going to be the same this year. So for the other 4 out of 5 people who don't get picked, what can they do? So we're trying to see, can we train more people to start looking into a talent visa, like an O1 from the university time itself? And or not just the O1, right? There's also other options, like can we get people to think about the cap exempt H1B, which doesn't require you to go through a lottery? Um, or can we help more founders to start their companies on a visa? So yeah, that's the initiative that we're planning, and it's a free event. And I highly hope that people actually watching this come attend it.
Absolutely. It's so important that even Wall Street Journal shared a research that when we interact with people and share our goals, whether they are financial goals, whether they are O1 visa goals, whether they are career goals, we get a sort of accountability partner. And they always remind us, oh, where are you on top of that goal? Where are you standing right now? Because if you don't have that partner, then it's not too difficult to be, sitting at home and scrolling and getting depressed, because you really need to go out and talk to people and to network. And I strongly say that network is your net worth. As many times you hear it, you keep forgetting, and that's the most value you can get by going to these events. And I still cannot believe you're bringing lawyers at zero cost for students. The amount of value you're adding is unimaginable.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, as you'd mentioned, besides me being there at the event, we're also bringing actual like immigration lawyers who've spent decades of their life helping thousands of immigrants to these events. So students can get to talk to them and ask questions, like legal questions to these lawyers. We're bringing, for example, one of our partners is Mob Squad, which is a company that helps people relocate to Canada. So if any student is thinking about moving to Canada, they can talk to this like representative from Mob Squad who can tell them exactly step by step how they can do that, like move from US to Canada if they're thinking of that. Um, and we're also getting free food for all the attendees. We're giving away free swag. There's like, I don't want to reveal what this free swag is, but it is something that's going to be very useful. I would have loved this if I was at Columbia right now. And we're also like, more than anything, I want to instill a sense of hope for students at these events. Like they should walk away feeling informed, optimistic about their future, and feel empowered that even though immigration is not easy, I can do this. And now I have all the resources to do it. Like I've met the experts. I know other people in the room like me who are also looking to the same thing. So I can work with them on this. And I feel like it's not impossible anymore. Like it's not impossible to get the O1 as an engineer or as a founder or as a product manager, whatever it is. So yeah, if we've put months of effort into this, and I really just want as many students as possible to show up to this venue on that day.
Yeah, I think students should take this opportunity no less than a hackathon, no less than a big networking event. Because I remember when I also went to a Harvard Business School, like a conference, the the excited students I got connected to and the network I keep on building when I go to these conferences is priceless for me. And students should feel that when once they go to any one of their meetup closest to their city.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we're also trying to make it public. So let's say that we're hosting something at UC Berkeley. So that's one of the universities we're going to be visiting. We're trying to make it seem such that can people who are not students currently can they also attend? So once we get confirmation from our university, point of contacts, we'll make it free, like free for not just students, but for anyone in that city who wants to sign up and come for the event. Because I do think like information like this should not be gate kept. I do run a membership community, which is a paid community, but we also run a free newsletter, and I've published a ton of free information on these visas in the last year and a half that I think like people should know that these exist, first of all. And they should, like, at least they should know that this exists right now, and then make a decision as to do I want to try for this or not after that.
Very well said. Now, can you please share how have you evolved in the last few years? First of all, graduating from the top university, Columbia University, which is dream of so many students coming here, plus getting that dream job, 200K almost at Salesforce, and then the right work-life balance too. As you had mentioned in the last podcast, 9 to 1, and then quitting it to run your own company.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so much more glamorous when you say it than when I'm living it. But I I I quit Salesforce at this point 2 years and 4 months ago. The first year after quitting was not easy because I was worrying more about money, and also I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was in a ways lost for a bit. Um, but I'm glad for it because I think you have to go through that period of feeling lost, exploring, like not saying no to anything, but just figuring out what would be the right path for you. But the last year and a half since I began working on Unshackled, the book that I published, the community we built, and projects like the book tour that we're doing, it's been very focused. Like I'm very clear of the mission here and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Um, and we've been able to, build a good team of people as well. Like I have two full-time employees right now, who work with me and a few part-time employees as well. So I just feel like I'm very grateful to get to do this because it's letting me exercise a lot of my skills. For example, in the last few months, I've been talking to a lot of sponsors to get sponsors for this book tour. I've never had to do this much sales in my life. Like, I never thought of myself as, a remotely good salesperson. But I realized there's actually so much like art and science that goes into how you can sell something that is both valuable and necessary and needed for the other party. So there's just like skills like this that I get to learn as a founder, which, if I was still at Salesforce, I would probably be a very good product manager. But now I can say I'm actually good at many things, not one thing, but like sales, writing, marketing, like building something from scratch, hiring people. There's a lot of other things that I've gotten to building a community, launching a tour, and so on. So I'm very grateful for that, and I quit Salesforce for creative freedom. I got the O1 for creative freedom, and it's nice to wake up and not worry about creative freedom anymore because I feel like I'm actually living that right now.
Wow, very well said. Because people think that, like quitting your job is like quit. Because people think that, very well said, because people think that quitting your job is like pursuing your passion. And before that, you were not pursuing your passion. So I think it's much more than that. It should focus on the deeper cause that you are actually quitting your job for, as compared to, just going after that glamorous life you were thinking in your head. And I can feel that, you have gone through that hardship and finally achieving that in your routine, that, you can also get sense of enjoyment plus some work life balance out of it, right?
Absolutely. I think it's like the ikigai thing of, what you love, what you can get paid for, what the world needs, and what are you good at as a skill set. So finding that like middle point of all these four quadrants, I think that's what we all kind of strive for in some way. And yeah, I mean, I know that you found that with what you're doing right now, and I'm so happy for that. And I can feel like I can also say that I found that right now.
Oh, wow. So happy to know. And one last question on the ending note will be, what do you think of USCIS? Do you think USCIS is actually treating immigrants who are on H-1B visa like slaves? Because currently, because of wait time increasing to 200 years for many Indians here, they are actually, debating that it's like, slavery. And a lot of these discussions keep happening on Reddit, and people feel very toxicated. Like in the past, I have seen that companies, do not give growth on H-1B visa. That has maybe changed, but what do you think overall?
I I don't think, first of all, the USCIS is to blame, and I'm saying this because the the body in the US government which can make changes is Congress. So the Congress has to pass a new law that increases the cap for green cards, for example, for Indian immigrants. Or like USCIS is simply following like, the written instructions of the Congress and the law right now. And so they're just doing their jobs. But I think what we really need is for Congress, and when I say Congress, it's the representatives and senators, like the people who we elect, or when I say we, not you and I, but the Americans elect every year to get into Congress. They should be the ones fighting and, like, I don't know, writing a new law that actually makes high skilled immigration more welcoming for people like you and me. And so I absolutely think that is long overdue. Like the last time was 1990. So it's been 34 years since then. And it's been tried a few times. In my own book, like I wrote the story of how this was tried in 2013 for in the last time, but it failed eventually. It didn't pass. So I know that there's another bill, like bills keep getting introduced every single month in Congress, but it doesn't reach the finish line. And I think it won't until the Indian immigrant community like calls up their state representatives and tells them that, look, this is important for me. Go like become a sponsor, sign this for me. But yeah, that's my long answer to that.
What could be the solution in your head? Because let's say if you consider a solution increasing the cap, other countries will be mad if they'll increase the cap for Indians. Then they will be like, oh, for people for China, Chile, like they will be like, but I think it doesn't matter to people from Chile because like not many people come from Chile or other countries. But if let's say they delete the country cap, then the whole world will suffer because only few thousand green cards can be given because they don't have as much workforce. So what do you think could be the right solution?
Um, great question. I don't think I'm the person to answer that, but I've seen, for example, I know certain countries where if you stay for 5 years in the country and work there, you automatically get citizenship and permanent residency. Um, I mean, Canada is one example of that, right? Like they're much faster in processing than US. So I think personally, I wish the US would introduce some rule in which you come to the US, you get into the workforce, you spend 5 years, and then you automatically get PR and citizenship. And you're right, like that probably will lead to people flooding the US. Um, but I think that is still better than having over 1 million immigrants stay in the US, but not be fully here. It's like you have one leg inside the country and one leg outside, where you're living here, you're paying taxes here, your family and children, everyone's here, but you're not really here because you're on a visa and you can never quit your job because your visa is tied to your employer. So it's like such a weird way to live, I think. And yeah, I so badly wish that they would just have like a blanket statement that says if someone stayed in the US for this much time, they will automatically get privileges like green card and so on. Um, but this is me speaking as just an individual and not, in any way as like a policy person.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And because this answers genuinely helps because it gives possibility to at least USCIS watching this video that it can happen.
I don't
If
know if
they
they're
try,
watching.
or maybe Congress.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I really hope so. And thank you. I mean, you're the one who's doing the hard work of getting this word out there. And I do think that more and more, US government will look towards content creators to spread information. For example, we had a call with, Doug a few months ago. And since then, he's been sending like anytime there's an update, he would send it to me. And this gives us a chance to spread the word in the right way possible to our audience. So I would love to see more of that collaboration between like content creators and the US government.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you so much, Soundarya. The amount of value you're providing to students is infinite, and I really, really appreciate you. And I hope students actually take time to go to your meetups and multiply the value as well.
Thank you so much. And just so if anyone's watching, they can visit tour.readandshackle.com. So that's tour.readandshackle.com if you can put it somewhere here. And that's where they can go register for free for all the events we're doing across the country. Thanks so much.